Yo, what is up, Bitcoiners? I hope you guys are having a good day. I'm fired up. I'm excited. What we're going to be doing today is something that I've been looking forward to for a few months now. Me and Bob, we've had this plan for a bit, and we're both very busy guys, so getting down and finally doing it, it's going to be exciting. So as you know, I'm a heat punk. Bob, if you guys aren't familiar with Bob's Home Bitcoin Immersion channel, is also a heat punk, and he's an engineer. He's someone who is building these systems, specifically immersion systems, and trying to integrate them into different aspects of his life that integrate home heating. This is something that I am just fascinated with, the amount of people working in this space and trying to build cool variations of heat reuse projects. Now, Bob has taken it a completely different route. If you're not familiar, he has a YouTube channel, and I'm going to share this. Let me just grab the link. I'm going to share his YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. So Bob's YouTube channel, I mean, he's got hundreds of episodes that dive into, and they're shorter. They're like 15 minutes, probably like 30 minutes max. But they go into the engineering behind a lot of the projects that he's done. But he doesn't just stop at like, oh, this is the project that I'm building. He reiterates and comes back and says, I built this thing, but now it doesn't work. And so this is what I'm going to try to see if it's a solution to my problem. And then he kind of documents that entire process. His videos are absolutely amazing, and I implore anybody, even if you're not necessarily interested in building a heat reuse system, the things that you'll learn from just watching Bob's videos is absolutely incredible. A lot of the people that I've had on this podcast are heat punks, and they're building heat reuse systems. And we all, like, unilaterally, we use Bob's channel as a way to like learn more about the systems that we're trying to build. So in my opinion, like, there's no better person to get on the podcast to talk about immersion systems and dive into like the how-to of Bitcoin mining heat reuse. So for anybody who's interested in this episode, I implore you, stay till the end. You're going to learn a lot of stuff. We're going to have a really good time. It's a little bit different for Bob, because usually he's doing like short form content and trying to just run over it real fast, but we're going to have a long form conversation. It's going to be great. I'm super excited. Before we dive in, I've got a couple of things. Let me remove that. I got a couple of things to show you, and then we'll dive right in.
Welcome to the Mastermind Club, your ultimate gateway into the world of Bitcoin mining. Whether you're just starting out or looking to scale your operations, our vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts is here to support you every step of the way. Join us for weekly sessions led by industry pros, where you'll exchange ideas, brainstorm strategies, and stay motivated on your mining journey. From heat management to site optimization, our monthly deep dives cover the technical know-how you need to succeed. And with access to our entire back catalog, you'll never miss a beat. But that's not all. Our members enjoy exclusive one-on-one sessions with veteran miners, plus direct access to special pre-sales and insider opportunities at Bitcoin Mining World. Ready to take your mining to the next level? Join the Mastermind Club today and secure your spot in the future of Bitcoin mining. Visit bitcoinminingworld.com or scan the QR code now. And now back to the show.
All right, guys, you know the deal. Scan the QR code at the bottom of your screen. Join the Mastermind community. It's completely free. Every other week, we do deep dives into technical topics that help you learn how to build a Bitcoin mining operation, whether it's a small operation in your backyard to an industrial mining operation in a container or a stick-built building. It's a great opportunity. I owe most of what I've learned about Bitcoin mining to the Mastermind Club. And the last thing I want to tell you guys about real quick is the Undermine Heat Punk Summit that Bob and I are both going to be at. It's going to be a great time. It's in Denver, February 21st through February 22nd. Undermine is a groundbreaking 2-day conference dedicated to the rapidly emerging field of hash rate heating, harnessing Bitcoin miners to power electric heating infrastructure. Summit activities will start at 11 a.m. Friday morning on the 21st. Now, the type of things that the type of people that go to this event are going to be Bitcoin miners, ASIC insiders, firmware developers, mining pools, pleb builders like myself and Bob, hash rate heating founders, engineers, contractors, tradesmen, and those with just a general passion of the Bitcoin mining space. Now, some of the confirmed attendees are the firmware and pools side, Brains, Ocean, Luxor. We've got hash rate heating designers, Softworm LLC, Exergy, and HBIM, Home Bitcoin Immersion Mining. And mining hardware and accessories are going to be Cryoblock, Altair Technology. You've got Scott, who is the developer of the BitAxe project, and Brett Rowan from PyASIC. You've got energy experts, upstream data, and HVAC, plumbing, and electrical experts who will also be there. This is a great opportunity for anybody who's looking to get into hash rate heating or just overall excited about the hash rate heating space. And you guys know that this is something that I am absolutely passionate about. So I will be there. Reach out to me. Join the rest of the crew at the space in Denver on the 21st of February. All right. With that, guys, we're going to start this show. Let me bring up Bob. Bob, hey. Welcome to the channel.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the great introduction. That was very flattering.
Oh, well, you know, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. We are all heat punks, and all of us, I mean, unilaterally across the board, we have all gone to your channel at one time or another to learn about these different systems and kind of figure out one thing or another. So you have just done an amazing thing for the space. You've done an amazing amount of work, and truly, we owe a debt of gratitude to you.
Oh, thanks. That's awesome.
Well, thank you, man. All right. So, you know, I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. Most of my audience knows that I get fired up when we talk about heat reuse. And so when it comes to heat reuse, you specifically have targeted the immersion side of things. Now, really quick before we dive into your Bitcoin rabbit hole story, could you just explain to us why you chose to go with the immersion route instead of hydro or air cooled?
Great question. And this kind of gets into, you know, just the when and how I got started. When I started looking at this was back in early 22. And at that time, the first thing to look at is air cooling. It's the simplest to set up. At that time, you know, the AC Infinity fan, Loki board solution really wasn't there. I mean, I know folks were working on it, but it wasn't as out there as it is today. And so I if it was there, I didn't see it. And so at that point, air cooling was, you know, big miners with a ton of noisy fans. And I thought that's not going to work. On the hydro side, I looked at that. And again, at that time, Bitmain came out with, I think it was the 19XP hydros. But anyway, they're all three phase. So hydro cooling really wasn't an option at that point. And so kind of by default, the immersion cooling was the one that I thought would work and met my goals for what I wanted to do to heat my home. So it really came down to kind of that simple progression, just looking at the options and realizing that had to be the one for me.
Yeah, this is something that, I mean, anybody who is getting into Bitcoin mining, whether you're a heat punk on the home heat reuse side of things or business heat reuse, or just somebody who's trying to build an industrial farm, you have to look at the different factors that play into your situation. You know, this could be external environments. This could be the amount of power that you have coming into the operation and your own personal finance situation. And that kind of helps you determine what the best route for you to go with. And each one comes with its own drawbacks. It's not like a silver bullet, oh, immersion is for everybody or hydro is for everybody. It's kind of, you have to do your own research. As we always say in the show, is do your own research, educate yourself and learn, and then figure out what the best solution is for yourself. So let's go back. Thank you for that explanation. That kind of helps set the scene for what we're going to do today. But let's go back. I want to enlighten the audience about your history. You know, where were you after you got out of high school? And then how did you traverse this world and get to Bitcoin? And then and I know this is a lot of questions, so we'll kind of break it down. But then once you got into Bitcoin, how did you decide that you wanted to start building home heat reuse systems?
Okay, I'll try and keep this short so I don't bore you with my life history. So Undergrad, I'm older than I look. I'm like 50 years old, so undergrad was a long time ago.
BS, man.
So yeah, you know, did high school, did undergrad, did grad school, found a job. I worked initially down at Sandia National Labs down in Albuquerque, you know, doing some really cool, amazing things that I really can't talk too much about. From there, I worked in Department of Defense for another 4 years. And, you know, working in that world, you really see how corrupt and awful our government and our military system really is when it comes to that whole world. I think, you know, it does eat your soul working in that world. And after a while, I couldn't deal with it anymore. So took a huge career break about 10 years ago and transitioned to medical devices. So I work for one of the largest medical device companies in the world, and I work on systems that are used in ENT, spine, and brain surgeries. So it's super fulfilling. I know individuals personally who have been, you know, I don't know if cured is the right word, but treated with the device I built. I've been in the OR watching brain surgery with something I built. Super fulfilling, and you know, I think I found a good engineering stint from where I'm at. So that's kind of my professional career of you know, everything I've done there. As far as Bitcoin goes, you know, I went through the financial crisis like everyone else did, and looked around and went, what the heck is this? Started educating myself and became, you know, a hard money gold bug. And then way back in like 2012, I stumbled across, I think it was in like Wired magazine, an article that talked about this new thing called Bitcoin. And I loved what I read, but if you look at that article, it was right after that first big boom and bust. And it's filled with all of the FUD that we know now is not true. Of, oh, it's, you know, it's an abandoned project. It's not going to work. It's going to crash. The government's going to take it over, yada, yada, yada. And I thought, well, great idea. You know, I'll move on. And then a couple years later, it kind of crossed my information feed again. So in 2013, you know, the price started booming, and I thought, okay, I'm in. So I decided to buy some Bitcoin, and I went on the Mt. Gox exchange.
Oh,
And
boy.
so, yeah, that didn't end well.
Right.
And after that, I got really, you know, after that experience, I got very cynical and was like, oh, this Bitcoin thing, it's, you know, it's just not going to work. I watched the 2018 boom and bust go. I bought a little more, but it was more just to kind of alleviate some FOMO I was having. And then it keeps getting worse. Then in 2020, I got super enamored by the DeFi and all the shitcoin technology. I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool tech, and got really enamored and really in depth in that. And the nice thing is that forced me finally to sit down and really learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, how it fits into the bigger world. And that's when I finally got orange pilled of, oh my God, Bitcoin is the right thing, and all this other stuff is crap. So very long path to get here. And then in I think late 21, early 22, I was going to put a big solar system on my roof to kind of, you know, start walking down my path of being self-sufficient in case we have power issues. And I realized if I just made my array just a little bigger, I would have extra power that I could go with mining. And so that's kind of how I started walking down this Bitcoin mining experiences. I realized, hey, I want to do mining at home. And then, like I said before, I started looking at my options, and away I went.
Wow. I mean, thank you. No, that was a very concise story, actually. I thank you. You know, like that really provides some of the context needed for going into this episode today. But what I want to highlight first and foremost is that I love how everybody that I've talked to that has come out of the DoD, or, you know, working for places like, what is the defense contractor, you know, these military grade industry like situations, they all come out of it with the same perspective of it's completely corrupt, it's completely just destroyed my, like, sucking my soul out of me, and it's not fulfilling. And I've heard this story time and time again. So I think for you personally, that was a good primer for like getting into Bitcoin. Now, you also have the secondary primer of being a systems engineer, and every single engineer that I've talked to understands Bitcoin in a way that us normal, everyday, regular plebs can't really, like, we don't see it the same way, because Bitcoin, it's not a complex system. It is a complex system. It's not a complicated system. That's kind of, you got complex systems and complicated systems, and Bitcoin is a complex system. And you as a systems engineer have this way of being able to look at the world and look at systems and start to diagnose and look at the individual parts. So I think that primed you as well to get into what you're doing now on the home heat reuse side of things. Would I be correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really does help. It's one of those skills you learn, is how to take, big things, break it down into small things so you can actually solve a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So just out of curiosity, are you still in the medical systems field?
Yeah. So I just surpassed, I think, about 10 years in that field. And I would love to go work in Bitcoin, but just to be very blunt, they pay me a lot of money to keep as an engineer. And I like what I do. And because it's very, when I literally have my niece's husband had a spine tumor, and he had surgery, and the device I helped build was used to help make that be a successful surgery. How can you not feel great knowing that what you did actually helped someone you actually know? I mean, it's hard for me to walk away from that, really.
No, I completely agree. Working in Bitcoin is not for everyone, first and foremost. And a lot of times when you go to work in Bitcoin, you have to take a significant pay cut. And also, I mean, where are you going to find like that much joy being able, you're saving people's lives, like literally saving people's lives with the systems that you build and the devices that you're helping to create for the world. So in my opinion, you're making the world a better place. You're saving people's lives, and there's not really a better place for you. But you're also, check it out, you're also in Bitcoin. You're also doing your 10,000 step journey in Bitcoin mining, and
Right.
we appreciate you for both aspects. So no, like that's awesome. All right, we got the introduction out of the way. So what I want to start with is all right, how do I frame this? So we have a lot of newbies listening into the show. There's some people who have been mining Bitcoin for a while, but a lot of people are new. A lot of people are just starting to grasp the Bitcoin mining concept. And it's a hard concept to grasp. Okay. Bitcoin mining is highly technical. It's not like, yes, the mining computer is an simple aspect to grasp. It's a computer. It has hash boards, it has a power supply, and it has a cooling unit. But when you try to overlay that on top of like, how do I start Bitcoin mining, it can get complicated. So the first question I want to ask you is, how does somebody who's looking at Bitcoin mining and saying, I want to do this, how do they start to answer the questions of how, why, and where? How do they get into Bitcoin mining?
Great question. And I think the first thing that when folks come to me, the first thing I recommend is looking at power. At some level, this is an economic decision. You can either spend your money to build a mine and mine Bitcoin, or you can just spend your money and buy Bitcoin straight away. So at what point does that trade-off, happen where mining makes sense? And I think the best way of understanding that, we have, what's called hash price, which is a metric that's produced both by Luxor and Brains. They both have their own different plot of it. I think it's calculated about the same though. And that tells you how much you will get from a return from providing hash power. You have to look at how much you're paying for your electricity. If you're paying more than probably around 5 or 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and you can look at that on your power bill, you may want to think twice, because when you start looking at, how much it's going to cost you to build your mine, how much it's going to cost you to operate your miners over the long term, and it's also a lot of work, you may realize, hey, from an economic perspective, it might be better to either buy Bitcoin straight away or find a hosting company that you can pay and have them run your miner with their cheap power. So I think that's the first thing to look at is just economics. What are you after? After you have that reality, then you look at it from a different perspective of, well, do I really want to do this? There are people out there who mine regardless. Their power expense is super high, but they're like, no, I just want to be part of this. And if you're doing that, awesome. I think that's fantastic. But I think it's good to walk in there realizing I'm doing this because I want to, not because I'm going to become a millionaire off of this, and realize that the reasons why you're doing this is because you want to mine, not because you're trying to make the most profitable solution. Now, having said all that, as soon as you start providing heat, all of this gets that much more complicated, because now it's just not about power cost. It's about this extra heat thing you're getting on top of that. So regardless of whether or what type of heat you're using, whether it's natural gas, electric, propane, whatever your source of heat is, you have to look at that cost and realize that if you're using the heat off your miner, well, now you're not expending your money on that source of heat. And so now that makes that math a little more complicated. I mean, I've got my house where I have solar, so some of my power is subsidized, so I have to work that in. And so you start simple and you start building on that idea, and you can make this as complicated as you want. But I think that first question of just saying, where am I on day one, really helps kind of see where you're at and how much maybe you have to go before you're happy with what you're doing with mining.
No, that's a perfect explanation of how you start. And something, I've been on Reddit a lot recently, and the biggest question I get is like, how do I start Bitcoin mining? I want to make money. And it's like, okay, well, let me break it down for you. First and foremost is this isn't 2012. You're really not going to make a ton of money. I mean, unless you can, let's say you've got $500,000 to $1 million on the sidelines, and you're ready to build an industrial scale mining operation. And even then, I mean, this is not a passive endeavor. Like I hate when people say, oh, invest in Bitcoin mining, it's passive. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. This is one of the hardest industries to get into, because first and foremost, every 4 years, your revenue, not your profit, your revenue is getting cut in half. Okay. And then on top of that, it is the most like competitive network that we have ever seen, ever. So anybody who's like, I want to get into Bitcoin mining, it's like, okay, so you're a sadist and you really want to just like beat yourself up as you go through this walk of like, I'm going to be a Bitcoin miner. Yeah, cool. Let's, so I love the way that you explain that, because power, first and foremost, is the first thing that you need to think about when getting into it. I had a conversation with my uncle just the other day. He's like, Trevor, I want to get into Bitcoin mining. And I'm like, Bo, you live in California. Your electric rate is 25 to 30 cents a kilowatt hour. There is no way you can mine Bitcoin in your basement. Because he's like, oh, just mine Bitcoin in my basement and I'll exhaust the heat out. I'm like, no, that's not what's going to happen here. So I then told him, about the BitAxe, which is like a lottery miner. I then told him about hosting situations. And I just explained to him that like mining Bitcoin at your home is not feasible for you unless you want to be a net loser every single month. So yeah, perfect explanation. I think that's a great place to start. Now we're going to dive into what you've built. You have built several, I think 3 or 4 different systems regarding heat reuse in your own home. And correct me if I'm wrong here. You built a integrated home heat system into your HVAC system. You built a hot water heater, and you built a dryer.
Actually, it's the home heating does both hot water and home heating. Okay. And then the third system was my attempt at building kind of the cheapest immersion system you can build by yourself without buying something. So I've got 3 different systems that I've gone through from the beginning to the end in terms of designing, building, and then seeing if it works.
Okay, and then you did build the dryer, but the dryer didn't turn out the way that you wanted it, right?
Yeah, and that was a huge learning experience, and we can get into that. And the here's the thing is that it worked, just not well.
Right.
And I think the limitation there is really the mining technology, the miner technology itself. And I
Hmm.
don't think we're that far away from having miners which would work, miners that are hot enough to where that would actually work.
Yeah, I wanna go over that one last. So we'll start with the home heat reuse system, and now we kind of covered why you chose to go with immersion. Immersion made sense for you. This home heat system. So explain your existing heating system, and then kind of go over just the different touch points of the project.
Sure. So initially, I had a hot air, a conventional, a natural gas hot air furnace, like most everyone else in the U.S. And the way I initially tried to get this to work is you have your immersion tank, right, where you're going to heat up this magic immersion dielectric fluid, and right after that tank, you have what's called a heat exchanger. And it's called a brazed plate heat exchanger is the specific type. And what that does is it transfers the heat from this really expensive immersion fluid that leaks a lot, and it's kind of, you really don't want to have a lot of it, and it transfers that heat into conventional water flowing through my house. And what's nice about that is as soon as you have the heat in that fluid, well, you've got 100 years of hydronic systems development where you have valves and gauges and radiators and everything made for water heating and cooling. So once you make that transition from the dielectric fluid to hot water, you can do amazing things with that. My first design was to take my furnace and just put a radiator right after it, so that the radiator would be heated by this hot fluid, and then my furnace would just be turned in a fan only mode and just blow air through it and provide heat to my house. My goal was to build that and then tear it down and rebuild a new system, because my furnace was over 15 years old and was on its last leg. And I'm like, oh, hold on just long enough. Unfortunately, I got almost the whole thing built, and the furnace gave up its ghost. So I kind of showed how it was built in the channel, but I was never able to turn it on and show that it works. So, but at least I could show this is feasible. And I know a couple of the folks I've worked with who have built systems like that, and they work great. After that, I did change my furnace out to what is called a hydronic furnace. And it's a really fancy name, but all it is it's a big squirrel cage fan with a radiator and a pump on top of it. So again, I take that hot fluid from my miner, send it through that radiator, and the fan blows that hot air through the rest of my house. And so that's how I heat my house. But before the hot water goes to that radiator, it passes through another heat exchanger, and that heat exchanger goes to my hot water feed. So I have a tankless hot water heater, and this preheated water goes into that. So what's really nice is that if my miners are really being stressed because it's really cold in my house is sucking all the heat out of this system, and let's say I only can bring my water up to maybe, I don't know, 70 or 80 degrees Fahrenheit, my tankless water heater can bring it the rest of the way up. So it's kind of a backup to make sure that I always have hot water. And I think that's one of the things that I do emphasize with anyone building a home system. These are experimental. Miners break. Sometimes the system doesn't work as you expected. Sometimes your internet connection goes down. And so for all of these scenarios, you always want to have a backup, so that if this crazy new thing you built doesn't work, you still have a hot house, you still have hot water. You need to make sure that that's in play. But that's kind of a summary. The other thing is I have another path of hot water that goes to my garage, where it passes through kind of a simple heater in my garage or a simple radiator with a big fan on it. So I also heat my garage if I have any extra heat left over. So my whole goal is to use every last bit of heat from these miners to either heat my home, my hot water, or my garage before it goes to a dry cooler outside, where it brings it all the way back down to the temperature I need to keep my system functioning. So it's a lot of things going together here. And it kind of shows how, you can take these systems and make them as complex as you want. You can make the systems with just heat your water. You can make this with just heat your house or just heat your garage, or you can do all of this. It just takes a little creativity.
Yeah. I mean, it's not simple. It's not just like a project. You're an engineer. So like when you look at it at a different, from a different perspective. But I don't want to just come out and say like, oh, you can't do it. Like, I think that anybody with the time, the energy, and the will can make this happen, especially because we have amazing channels like yours, the Home Bitcoin Immersion Mining channel. And then, you have other resources out there I mean, Bitcoin X is a great place to find people who have built these systems. I've spoken with most of you on X, and I think that what you said about being able to make the system as complex or as simple as you want to make it really highlights the versatility in Bitcoin mining. Now, I presume that you leave your miners running 24/7, correct?
Yeah, and that's how I built this. Is at the very end of this very complicated fluid loop is I have a dry cooler outside. So even in the middle of summer where I'm not using any heat, I still have that dry cooler that can bring the temperature down so that I keep my miners running. So yeah, and that's how I decided to build my system. Other people design it so that their miners only turn on and off when they need that heat. So again, that's one of these another big decisions to make when you build these systems. Do you want to keep your miners on all the time so you maximize your Bitcoin revenue? Or do you want to just turn these on and off when you need the heat because, hey, maybe your electricity is really expensive and running it in the middle of summer just doesn't make sense for you. So again, you've got a lot of options to build these systems.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the two different systems that you and I have built, and I've kind of gone over my system, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But you've built an immersion system, whereas I built a air cooled system, and I chose to go with air cooled because air cooled was cheaper. I didn't have a whole lot of space. I live in a manufactured home; it's really small, so I mean, I only have so much space to build this, and so for me, leaving my miner on 24/7 is not an option. First and foremost, I'm married and I have a wife and a child. And if that house is over 72 degrees for too long of a period, I start getting complaints. So the compliance department in my home matters. So I've decided that, I only run my miner when that heat is necessary. But these immersion systems, we spoke with Nico on the podcast about his hydronic boiler a while ago, and for him it's the same thing. He runs his 24/7 and he runs the extra heat through the dry cooler, gives them this optionality of leaving it on 24/7. Not everybody has that capability. Not everybody has the money to build these systems because, as you know, these immersion systems are not cheap. I am curious, what system did you use for your immersion tank?
Great question. So again, there's a lot of history here. Is that in 2022, we were coming off of the last big, Bitcoin boom, and there was a lot of kind of fly-by-night tank manufacturers out there. And I looked at all these, and I'm like, oh, I don't know who's going to be around and who's not. And I looked at some of the costs and some of the shipping. I'm like, oh, I think I can do this better. So my first tank, I built my own. And I would not recommend that. One of my learning experiences was that it didn't quite work well. And after that, the folks at DCX set me up with one of their BitPod systems, and it's worked great. I know that the fog hashing guys, I've had lots of conversations with them and their system. They're one of the manufacturers that were around in 2022, and I looked at them like, oh, they're going to be here. They are still here, and they're here in force. They're now a major player in both the industrial and home immersion space. And so, I have a DCX system at home, but both of those are great tank systems, and I think it's going to depend on what can you get for what cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, these systems aren't cheap, and then you're also talking about they're bulky, they're not easy to ship, so they cost a lot of money. I mean, shipping is almost half of the actual price of the equipment itself, and then you also have to look into this immersion fluid, which is not cheap. It's pretty expensive stuff.
It is, and folks have tried to word of warning. Folks have tried to take shortcuts there. Don't do that. The immersion fluid is made to ruin your miners, and the miners are expensive. So you really do have to kind of buy the magic fluid. You need the right stuff, and it's not cheap, and it's one of those commitments. Is when you build one of these systems, you're kind of thinking long term that, hey, I'm going to have this system for many years, and it's going to become an integral part of my home or my setup. If you're looking for just, to build this thing and catch the next wave of Bitcoin, it's probably not a good economic decision. This is more of a long-term, I build this into my house and I'm running as long as I can.
Absolutely. So let's kind of talk about some of the problems that you've run across when building out this home heat and water system.
Yeah, great comment. And I do my best to kind of bring these up and talk through these in my episodes, because everyone I've talked to, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, all of us have these stories of, hey, I tried this and this didn't work, and I tried this and this kind of broke. So it's important for folks to know that when you do have all these systems, you have to be a tinkerer. You have to be someone who kind of likes, figuring things out and
problem solving.
Yeah. So the big, my tank went down. That was my first big problem to solve. After I got that built up, the next big problem was, and as part of my whole system, I had a mixing valve with a filter on it that was screening, debris from my lines. Well, when I built my system, I took a shortcut and never flushed my hydronic system. That was a mistake. And what happened was that debris kind of built up behind this filter and clogged my entire cooling loop. And so my miners were overheating, had to figure out exactly what was going wrong. And finally, I looked at this one filter and realized it was 100% blocked. So that was kind of my next problem. I also had with my control system, had a little bit of a hiccup there where I was misusing some of the electronics. And I kind of knew walking in that I was, and I was trying to use something the way it was not designed to be used. Learned you're not supposed to do that. So these little things along the way that you kind of stumble upon. I will say that a lot of things worked really well. My pump has worked like a champ. Heat exchangers have worked like a champ. My dry cooler outside, I had a lot of fun trying to minimize the noise, but that was more kind of a fun thing of just kind of optimizing. It's always worked perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the system, you have so many components out there. By odds, something's always going to go wrong, and it's important to kind of celebrate your victories and not focus on your side steps or mishaps, because it's a long road.
Yeah, well, something that I like to talk about is that every failure is an opportunity to learn. I think the major piece of advice, and you might agree with me, is don't cut corners. Like, especially with Bitcoin mining, don't cut corners. But every time something fails and something breaks, this is an opportunity to learn, because when you are building this stuff out and you've done your research, you've read the books, you've watched the podcasts, you've, done all of the requisite research and R&D to figure out how to build it. I mean, you still don't know everything. And then, the thing about it is, you're talking thermodynamics, you're talking about hydronics, you're talking about electrical engineering and everything in between, before we even get to the financial aspect of mining Bitcoin. So my point is that I understand, don't cut corners and try to build the best system that you can. But when these failures happen, like you said, celebrate your victories, but also think of it as this is an opportunity to learn more and educate yourself more on the different systems that you've built.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think this is one of the things you have to realize is you are taking on a multidisciplinary system. It's, you're going to have the miners. You need to figure out that. You have electrical systems. You need to figure out that. You've got a thermal system. You need to figure out that. And, my engineering background is in thermal systems. Thermal systems are notoriously hard to calculate, how to model. I don't care how well you think you've worked this down on paper. You're going to build it, and if you're within 20% of what you thought it was going to be, that's success. And right. So a lot of times, another maybe recommendation is, overbuilding a little, not a bad idea. Maybe a little bit, like my radiators, they're a little bigger than what I thought I need. I've never had a problem with cooling. My pump, it's a little stronger than what I thought I'd need. I've never had problems with my pump. Same thing with my heat exchanger. Same thing with my piping size. If you give yourself a little margin, it then cuts down on a lot of problems you might have.
Yeah. Again, we've touched on it several times so far, is these aren't cheap. And if you're going to build it, it's best not to cheap out, because something that I was told was that, if you build it right the first time, it's build it right or build it twice. Like really at the end of the day, like if you go through and you undersize these things or just give yourself like the bare minimum, you're gonna find that it's not what you wanted, and you're not going to be happy with the system overall, and you might have to go back and rebuild it. So try to keep away from doing that, and make sure that you, again, do your R&D, figure out how big of a heat exchanger you need, how large of a pump and like radiator. All these things are important. So that's your water heater and your heating system, and I think that was a great overview of it. I want to move into this cheapest immersion system that you can build. Now, tell us a little bit about this system, and again, we're going to talk a little bit about the trials and errors that you had while building this.
So luckily for me, I had the experience of finishing my home system. So you kind of know where the sticking points are and where you're going to have issues. So it was really good walking into that, and that I wasn't having to learn everything. And, I looked at, like we talked about, these immersion systems are expensive. And so I was like, well, what happens if you were not going to buy one of these commercial systems and try and build your own? How cheap can you go? And so I found a perfectly sized fish tank, and had a friend cut me some plastic to kind of make the wall you need between the hot and cold fluid. I did spend a lot of money on a pump, because I think that's where good money is spent. And then I bought some off the shelf radiators. So it was fun building it. It was just kind of cool to put it together. I gave the radiator, I didn't calculate. I just kind of looked at it and thought, oh, this might be big enough. And I should have known better. If you just kind of randomly pick something up, it's going to be wrong. So my radiator was undersized and had to improve that. The other issue I had was this plastic wall in the middle of my glass tank. The adhesive leaked a little, so I had to reseal that, but that was an easy fix. Other than that, it worked well. And when it comes to the end cost of the system, I was actually really surprised that the cost really wasn't substantially less than like an equivalent, like the C1 system made by Fog Hashing is the equivalent system. If you look at that cost, even with shipping, it is several $100s more. But given the fact that it's kind of guaranteed to work, that may be worth your cost. And so I was hoping it would be like $1,000 cheaper, but it really is not. I mean, the material and fluid cost what they cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have to have a heat exchanger, and it's not like you can build a heat exchanger from scratch. I mean, you might be able to if you understand how these work, but I mean, anybody like myself, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I don't think you did that either. So, that's a significant cost right there. But yeah, I mean, what are some of the things that kind of made you realize that this is not cost effective?
It was just it was just kind of the end cost at the end when you just tally everything up. And one of the things that kills you in any of these hydronic or fluid systems is just fittings and piping and valves. Is that these little things nickel and dime you to death. And when you look at the commercial manufacturers, they buy these in bulk, so they get a discount. And I think that's really where they have an advantage over the homeowner, is they can buy everything at lower cost. But outside of that, the system did work. And so if you are wanting to, some people just like building their own stuff. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to, as much as I say, hey, these commercial systems are awesome, if you are someone who likes to tinker and has a building shop, go for it. Build your own system. You'll learn a lot. There's a ton of information out there on how to build a tank and how to hook it up to the fluid lines and the pumps and everything else. So as much as I'm like, yeah, for most people, you probably should just buy a commercial system. If you want to build it, go for it.
Yeah, I think you told me this the last time that we spoke. It's kind of like the hobbyist car builder versus like going and buying a car off the line. You can go and you can buy a Dodge Hellcat, and you can spend, $80,000-$90,000, and you can get it with 600 horsepower, and it's built and it's just ready to go, and it performs excellent. Or you can take a Honda Civic and you can build the holy living crap out of it. You can put, $40,000 into building the motor and the transmission and everything. Is it going to perform as well? Is it going to feel as safe? Like you're going to learn a lot. And if you're the type of person that likes to build and likes to tinker and likes to mess around with it, then yeah, like that's probably the way you want to go. But I would recommend most people who don't have the warehouse and the shop and the tools and the knowledge and the desire to learn, just buy the system ready to go.
Yeah. And I think that the car analogy is awesome. Is there are people who build the cars because they love to build the car. And I think it's the analogy is here too. If you like to build things and you want to build your own tank, awesome, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like it's not for everybody. And I think that's one of my favorite things that I've, I say this a lot. I have a lot of favorite things, but one of my favorite things about the Bitcoin mining industry is I really do believe there is something for everyone. Whether you're the type of person that wants to learn, you're an autodidact, you really enjoy diving into these systems and figuring out how they work, or you're just the type of person that wants to benefit from the fact that you're mining Bitcoin. There is something for everyone. And so that's why it's so cool to get to talk to people like yourself who have done the work to build stuff like this, man.
Yeah. It's, and I'll say, I want to make this comment that all of us builders, we're all busy people. So sometimes we don't have time, but if we do have time, we love helping others. I mean, I don't think I've met anyone in the space who doesn't want to help someone who's new into this and help you make that call and make that decision of, well, should I build my own? Should I buy? What should I do? We're all here to help. And I think the only downside is, I know I've talked to a few others, is like, when you get like, a bunch of emails in your inbox, you're like, man, it gets to be, it's not that we don't want to respond. It's just like, man, there's a lot of people who want to get into this. So it's kind of exciting to see.
Yeah, and it is. And I think that's one of the reasons why I decided to do the podcast, is because I am not an engineer. I'm not a developer. I'm not somebody who is going to take the time to dive super deep into these different systems. But what I do enjoy doing is having conversations like this. So we all have our different roles to play. And like you said, there are so many people in the space that are just willing to have conversations like we're having today. And so that's one thing that I do love about the Bitcoin ethos and the Bitcoin ecosystem, is just we're all in it together. We're all trying to build and iterate in our own little echo chamber, and then get outside of that echo chamber, kind of like the Undermine Heat Punk event that's coming up here soon. We're all doing different things in our own garages and our own spaces, but now we're coming together at this one event to share all that knowledge that we've kind of accumulated over the years.
And I think we've had this conversation before, but the fact we're all coming together, this to me is analogous to the late 70s, early 80s, where if you look at what in the computing world back then, we had these giant mainframe computers owned by corporate America, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had a few people who were tinkering in their garages, making these little kind of home computers. And it took, 5-10 years before they had a commercial type of setup. There's a bunch of different people who competed. After all, we had a few winners that really worked. And then that evolved into a place where we now have home computers everywhere. If you look at mining right now, we have these giant corporate miners out there who are all kind of running their thing. And now we have all of us who are now starting to work in our garages, making these small, compact, consumer-grade systems. And just in the last, 2-3 years, if you look at what was available back in 22 versus what's available today in terms of off-the-shelf systems you can just buy. I mean, you've got the AC Infinity fan setups that are now literally, you can buy a package from a number of different vendors out there. We've got these home immersion systems, which you can buy. The hydro systems are, I think we're just in the cusp to start seeing those provided at a home basis. I mean, another few years, it's going to be something where for a home miner, it's going to be super easy, and you don't have to do as much work to set these up. So I see an analogy there, and maybe 5-10 years from now, home mining is going to be something that everyone does.
Yeah,
we can hope.
Well, and I don't know if you saw this, but Canaan literally just released at the CES event in Vegas. They literally just released a baseboard flooring heat system. It's 30.
Wow.
It's 35.5 terahash. It's like $850.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I mean, there are some drawbacks. I mean, we've heard stories about how they've had backdoors into their systems before, and so that's a drawback. But for anybody who's wanting to mine Bitcoin at home using the heat as a resource, like this is perfect. And not to mention, like, I really think that the space starts to shift when large manufacturers like Canaan, Bitmain, MicroBT, when they start competing for our business and not
Mhm.
just for the industrial mining business, things start to shape out a little bit differently. Like, I know that right now we're really on the cutting edge. We're really on the cusp of where this industry is going to go. But what happens when, like the personal computing era, and even today, you can go out and you can buy aftermarket fans, you can buy your own graphics cards, you can go buy all these different components and build your own system. What happens when you can buy the specific chips, when you can buy the specific hash boards, and you can put everything together with a special type of fan and a special case? And that world right there, I mean, we're at the beginning. We're not even at the middle of it, but I think we're starting to see stuff happen.
And if you look at what we're doing here, is we got it coming from both sides. We've got like the BitAx decentralized mining hardware development, and then we've got the corporate folks who are starting to build systems that are more targeted towards home builders. So these two things are coming together at us. So it's going to be super interesting to see how all this plays out and what we have to play with a few years from now.
Oh gosh, I'm really excited. I'm not gonna lie. Like, heat reuse, like it fires me up. I love these conversations. It's just it's so amazing. All right, we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I want to try to do this really quickly. Now, the dryer. You built a dryer. I mean,
Yes, I did.
it functioned. It
I
worked.
did.
Run down this project. How did you make it? What did you do? And then why exactly did it not function to the extent that you would have liked it to?
It's interesting. I learned a lot about clothes dryers, and it's a topic that I never ever thought I'd become somewhat of an expert on. But you have to learn. And one thing is, if you look at any consumer grade clothes dryer, and if you have one at home, look at the back of it. What you'll see is that the ducting is about 4 to 6 inches in diameter. And if you look at that, that's from a mining perspective, that's really small. And the reason why is that clothes dryers typically produce about, say, 150 to maybe 200 cubic feet per minute of airflow. They're really low airflow devices. So hooking up an air-cooled miner directly to your dryer, a fully air-cooled miner, they need something like 600, 800 CFM. I mean, it's many times what a clothes dryer is really made to handle. Folks have done this, and it can work. But for someone like myself, where my dryer is in the middle of my house and I've got a 20-foot ducting between that and the outside, I'm like, if I hook up a full-size miner and try and just use the hot air from that, my house is going to get really hot really quick, and it's probably not going to work. So I thought about, how can I use this for how can I use immersion to do this? And so what the thought was is that I would use, again, one of these small little systems that I built, and I could use the hot immersion fluid coming off of the miner, and I could pass that through a really long radiator stack, radiator after radiator after radiator after radiator. And the idea is that the air to the dryer would slowly flow through that at 150, 200 CFM into the dryer. And because it's moving so slow, and because I have so many radiators, that it would fully absorb the heat from the miner and send that into the dryer. So conceptually, what the immersion system does is it kind of decouples the airflow that I need for the dryer from the cooling from the miner. So this gives you kind of a way of working with whatever airflow your dryer really needs. And so I built the system, and like everything else, you build it and you try it, and things didn't quite work. I needed a couple more radiators, and I needed to manage the airflow inside the dryer a little more. I also hot wired everything in so that literally I have a switch in the outside of the dryer. So you flick a switch, you can go from Bitcoin heating to normal heating. So again, I have a backup in case it doesn't work. And it actually did work. I could dry a load of clothing, but it's effectively running your dryer on its lowest setting. And the big reason why, and so you'd have to run multiple cycles and multiple cycles, and it just got to be something where I don't want to spend my whole day doing laundry. And the whole idea behind a laundry system is you set it and walk away. And the main reason why this didn't quite work, and again, I learned a lot about clothes drying, is that a dryer running at normal high speed generates hot air at like 150 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mhm.
And those temperatures are much, much higher than what a lot of the mining systems are available on the market can produce.
Mhm.
So you really do need a miner that can operate at a much higher temperature. If you look at in the last year, What's Miner has now come out with a hydro miner which says it can run at these higher temperatures. I don't think they are really available on the consumer market yet. At least last summer, they were only selling them with minimal order quantities of like, I don't know, 20 to 50 or whatever. But when those start to come down to where you can buy one or two of these, I'm interested to see if now with that system, if the air temperature, or I'm sorry, the fluid temperature coming off that miner is now hot enough to where this actually works, where you can run your dryer on a single load and get dry clothes. So that's kind of the big story of what I learned along the way. And I think it has promise. What I built was a proof of concept. Proof of concept does work. It just right now the technology isn't quite there. But if we can get hot miners, this will work. I really do think so.
Yeah, and this goes back to the way that the industry is shaping up. Like we, the heat punks, we have made ourselves known. We are making our voices heard and letting the industry know, like, we are going to do this. And if you want our business, you are going to design chips and PCB boards that work for us. And if you don't, we're going to pull your chips off your boards. We're going to make our own boards, and we're going to do a lot of the work ourselves. So this is obviously, again, we're at the beginning stages of where this is, but I think 5 to 10 years out, like the world, it's going to look completely different. I have seen these dryers work. I've seen them used with air cooled, but again, these dryers are not made to have an external heat source pumping air in and then pulling air out. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. And what you did was an immersion system. So it's completely different. I mean, the infrastructure is completely different. I'm just curious, if you, like, let's say everything aligned perfectly for you, if you had to do this again, what would you do?
If I could get a miner that's hot enough, I wouldn't change much, because the whole idea I had behind this is, if we look at commercial dryer manufacturers out there, I think it's going to be a heavy lift to ask them to redesign their whole architecture to have miners built into the devices. I just think they're going to look at us like we're crazy. However, imagine a company that makes a box that sits on your wall that you plug your existing dryer into, and that heats up the air for you, and you just turn your dryer on, just airflow, right? So that's kind of what I was looking for, is can I build something that's a proof of concept of this magic box that hangs on the wall over your dryer. And I think if we had chips that can handle that temperature and we can mine at those higher temperatures, I think this would work, and it would work with any dryer, regardless of how you've plumbed your air. We can go as low as 130 to 100 to 100 or to 200 cubic feet per minute, which is what normal dryers have. And so any person who has a dryer at home, you could say, yeah, buy this box, plug it in, put this ducting into your dryer, and now you're mining Bitcoin while you're drying your clothes. So that's kind of what I would love to see, is something that's an out of the box solution for anyone with a dryer, such that they don't have to buy a new dryer. They just buy this box, hook it up, and run it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the future is a lot closer than we think it is. And, it takes people like yourself building systems, figuring out how it works and why it doesn't work to the full extent. And then we just keep pounding that drum of, like, we need hotter chips. We need hotter chips. I mean, people are dying for the day that we can boil water and create steam with a Bitcoin mining chip. Like, once that happens, oh my gosh, it's like the entire universe expands.
It does. And this is where, like I said, we have these two fronts coming together. I've not talked to any of the BitAxe folks, but I'm kind of wondering, could they maybe make like a PCB board strip with like 5 miners on that only has the mining chips, that all the other control chips are off somewhere else, so that this little board could run at really high temperatures, that maybe we could just see how hot we could run this. I mean, like I said, we're not that far away. We really aren't. I think it just takes some engineers to really focus on this as a problem to solve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm super stoked for it, man. I can't wait. All right. So again, we're running up on time. So I'm trying to pack everything into this episode that I wanted to talk about. So the last thing I want to talk about is, obviously, when you started doing immersion mining, immersion was really the only thing that you could really start to tackle because of where the space was at the time, and the different hurdles between the electricity and the price. Now, we have new systems that are coming out. We've got, something like the Cryoblock, which is a direct to chip hybrid cooling unit that upgrades an S19 to be cooled by water. What are your thoughts on this, and where is the industry headed?
I think, to me, and that the Cryoblock is a great solution. I'm glad that someone has spent some engineering time and effort and making a solution that I think is a lot better. They've had these cooling blocks out there in the market before, and I've always kind of looked at them and kind of wondered about, the build and engineering quality, and what these guys have done really looks great. I think that's a great solution. And again, every solution depends on your home setup. What do you need? What are the constraints of your home in terms of what's going to work, what's not going to work? What I'm really excited, and what I haven't really seen out there that's a really good, easy, out of the box solution, are the hydro miners. And that air cooling, we have the AC affinity fan, we have the folks who figure that out. We have immersion cooling, we have the commercial off the shelf systems there. The hydro mining is one where right now we really haven't seen a lot of home based design systems out there. I mean, they're there, and I think you can start building them. I would love to see that space build out, because now we have all three options available for each homeowner to look at and decide what to use. And I think hydro right now is kind of the weakest one, but give it another year, I think it'll be there.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to dive into the the Cryoblock. I'm going to be getting one here in the next couple months, and I'm going to be tearing down an S19, and I'm going to be slapping those heat sinks on there, or the Cryoblock on there in lieu of the heat sinks, and I'm going to see what that puppy can do. I'm very curious. So something that I've been thinking about for a long time now is radiant heat. You've got your floor, you've got tubing that goes under the floor and water's running through it.
Mhm.
How do you heat that water? Could I use a Cryoblock to pull the heat off that miner and directly inject it into a flooring system through a heat exchanger?
Yes.
I don't know how
Yes.
it's going to work, but that's
Yes.
something that I'm really excited about. So
Yeah, I've worked with folks who are building those systems, and that's, as far as heating a house, like my house is heated via air, right? I have ducting throughout the house, so I really can't shift to it. But if you have the opportunity to put in a radiant floor in your house, that is it's one of the easiest ways of coupling mining with heating, is through radiant floor, because as soon as you can heat a fluid, you can heat your house. It's that easy.
yeah, no, it's the world is opening up, man. It's an incredible time to be alive, and it's an incredible time to be a Bitcoiner and to be tinkering with these systems. I am so glad that I came into Bitcoin when I did. I wish I would have gotten in sooner, obviously, like everybody does, but the amount of knowledge, the amount of information, people like yourself, I mean, you've done over 400 episodes on immersion mining itself. So, I mean, the information is out there. There's so many people that are willing to have these conversations, and it's just, it's it's like the Library of Alexandria is here. We just have to go out and find it.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, if you look out there and you don't have the answer that you need, ask us. Ask the folks in this area. We all want to help, and you'll find someone who's hit that problem and knows the solution, because we've all been there.
Yeah, and I mean, guys, to the audience, I'm speaking directly to the audience at this point, is if you have a question and you don't know who to ask, reach out to me. My email is always open, trevor@bitcoinminingworld.com. Reach out to me, because I am slowly building out this Rolodex of Bitcoiners who are building systems. So if you have a question and I don't have the answer, which generally I don't, but most of the time I know somebody who does, and I can get you in contact with them. So if you can't find them, if you can't find the answer to the question that you have, reach out to me. I'm happy to field some of these conversations for you. Last couple things. What is your last piece of advice that you want to leave with the audience?
Build it. build it. I mean, at some level, it's fun. Try something. I know it seems intimidating because it's new. Try something. Build something. Take that first step. It's the only way you get started.
Yeah, get off zero, guys.
Yeah.
You couldn't understand Bitcoin until you bought some. You can't understand a Bitcoin heat reuse system until you build one. So that's great advice, man. Thank you, Bob. Tell the audience where they can find you, how they can reach out.
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is HBIM, Home Bitcoin Immersion Mining channel. I've got all my contacts on there in terms of, X and Telegram and email and all the good stuff. So, take a look at the channel, subscribe. If you have ideas of new channels or topics you want me to cover, send them my way. I'm always looking for new ideas.
Awesome. I'll make sure that all of that gets put in the show notes. The last thing, and I ask everybody this. So, Bob, what does Bitcoin mean to you?
In one word, freedom. And it's a loaded word because you look at what a lot of what's holding us as humanity back. It's fiat. And we have this this saying that Bitcoin fixes everything. I disagree with that. I don't think Bitcoin fixes everything. I think Bitcoin gets fiat out of the way so we can fix things. And I think that's where it gives you the freedom so we can finally fix a lot of these problems we have in our world because fiat's holding us back.
Yeah, 100%. I've said it before, man. When your entire life is based on transactions, transactions between you and a company, you and an individual, you and just other people in your life, that medium of transacting, the money, plays a key role, a pivotal role in how you make decisions and how you live your life, and the just the personal responsibility that you hold. And so when that money is corrupted, when that money is being siphoned away from you, that value, that time, you can't make good decisions. You can't make honest decisions. And so, no, Bitcoin does not fix the world. Bitcoin, like you said, opens it up to where we can start to make better decisions, have a lower time preference, and start to fix the systems in the world that need fixing. And we need engineers like yourself. We need people who come from different backgrounds, whether you're a finance background, whether you're a marketing background, an engineer, whatever it is. Like, we need you in the system working to make it better and to spread the knowledge. So, I just want to say I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you and what you're doing, not just on the Bitcoin front. As a medical systems engineer, I appreciate what you're doing there because you are changing people's lives in both fields, man. So thank you. God bless you. You're an amazing guy.
Thanks. This has been a huge experience. Thanks for having me on the show. This has been great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, guys, this has been the Build a Mind podcast. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you enjoyed the podcast. We're really getting up there. I'm starting to see some significant growth in the amount of people that are watching, in the people that are liking and following. And so I think we're starting to do a really good job here, and I'm really happy with the way that it's turned out. So catch us on the next one. And until then, keep on stacking, keep educating yourself, keep growing. Thanks, everybody.
Please note, the Build a Mind podcast provides information for general educational purposes only. This information should not be construed as legal, financial, or investment advice. We do not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information presented, and we encourage you to consult with a professional advisor, legal advisor, and/or financial advisor before making any financial decisions. The Build a Mind podcast and its affiliates are not responsible for any losses incurred as a result of using the information provided.
Holy